In 2006, as India's domestic aviation market was still dominated by full-service flag carriers with bloated cost structures, a new airline placed an order before it had operated a single flight. IndiGo committed to 100 Airbus A320 narrowbodies. The order shocked the industry. Analysts called it reckless because Indian aviation was a graveyard of failed ambitions. Kingfisher would soon collapse. Air India was hemorrhaging cash. Jet Airways was overextending itself. But IndiGo had a different bet. Stripped of all non-essential complexity, minimal margins for distraction. One narrow-body type, one cabin class, one cost obsession. For nearly 2 decades since, Indian aviation has accepted a painful truth. International long-haul belonged to someone else. Indian passengers flew abroad through Dubai, Doha, Abu Dhabi, Muscat, Bahrain or Istanbul. Geography always won. India had the passengers, the Gulf had the aircraft. Then in April 2024, IndiGo placed its first widebody order, 30 Airbus A350-900s. In October 2025, it doubled that commitment to 60 firm aircraft, with options for 40 more. Deliveries begin in 2027. Add to that 40 Airbus A321XLRs, with the first delivered in January 2026, and IndiGo is building a long-haul machine inside an airline that spent 18 years refusing to build one. But here's what makes no sense. IndiGo became India's biggest airline by refusing to act like Air India. 60 widebodies won't outscale Emirates, they won't outclass Singapore Airlines, they won't replicate Qatar Airways' premium machine. They won't even match Air India's existing widebody footprint immediately. Yet, every Gulf carrier, every European flag carrier, and a freshly capitalized Air India are watching IndiGo with concern. So, how can an airline built on the opposite of long-haul suddenly threaten empires built on it? To understand why IndiGo is betting its identity on widebodies, we need to understand why it spent 2 decades avoiding them. IndiGo's success was a machine of deliberate simplicities: narrowbodies, low fares, dense seating, domestic scale, simple operations, high aircraft utilization. By maintaining a uniform fleet of A320 family aircraft, the airline minimized maintenance costs, simplified crew training, and maximized aircraft turnaround times. It avoided the exact thing that usually destroys airlines: complex fleets, prestige long-haul routes, premium cabins, multi-class service, expensive hub operations. By March 2025, IndiGo's fleet had grown to 434 aircraft, with an outstanding order book of nearly 1,000 more Airbus aircraft. For the fiscal year ending March 2025, the airline posted a net profit of 30.6 billion Indian rupees, with a net profit margin of 13.8%. These are not numbers a low-cost carrier produces by accident. They are the result of a model so disciplined that it became boring. And boring in aviation is profitable. So, when IndiGo's order for widebodies landed, the question wasn't whether the airline had the capital, it was whether the airline had the identity to absorb what widebodies actually require. Because buying widebodies is easy compared with filling them profitably. For decades, India generated huge international demand, but much of the value leaked overseas. Indian travelers flew abroad on Emirates through Dubai, on Qatar Airways through Doha, on Etihad through Abu Dhabi, on Turkish Airlines through Istanbul. Gulf carriers built empires on Indian traffic. They offered one-stop access to Europe, one-stop access to North America, strong premium products, huge connecting banks, massive widebody fleets. By the end of March 2026, Emirates had 277 widebodies. Qatar Airways commands 207 passenger widebodies. Etihad fields 83 widebodies. The combined widebody arsenal of just 3 Gulf carriers exceeds 560 aircraft, almost all of them deeply exposed to Indian traffic. India had the passengers, the Gulf had the aircraft, and the value followed the aircraft. Consider a hypothetical $1,000 itinerary from Lucknow to London via Dubai. The short Indian leg might capture $100 for a local carrier, the remaining $900 covering the long Dubai-London segment, fuel surcharges, premium margins, and hub fees flowed entirely to the UAE. International passenger traffic from India is projected to rise further. The Indian middle class is expanding. The diaspora is enormous. Outbound demand is exploding. The traffic existed. It just connected through someone else's hub. The India Gulf market is not simply free competition. It is shaped by bilateral air service agreements that limit how many seats each country's airlines can operate. The seat quota between India and the UAE has been capped at roughly 65,000 weekly seats for over a decade. Sir Tim Clark, president of Emirates, has publicly said, "For every seat we sell, there are probably 10 takers." Gulf carriers want more access to Indian cities. Indian airlines want the government to hold the line while they build their own long-haul capacity. If India grants Gulf carriers more rights now, Emirates and Qatar Airways will grow faster than IndiGo and Air India. If India restricts Gulf expansion, Indian carriers get time to build their own networks. The real fight is not just in the sky, it is in the bilateral agreements. But protection is a double-edged sword. A bilateral war can buy IndiGo time. It cannot buy IndiGo a long-haul business model. The A350 is not just a new aircraft for IndiGo, it is a confession that narrowbodies alone cannot win India's next aviation war. The A350-900 gives IndiGo real long-haul capacity. It allows non-stop routes from India to Western Europe, the UK, East Asia, Australia, potentially parts of Africa, and selective North America, depending on configuration. Then there is the A321XLR, with a range of up to 8,700 kilometers. It allows IndiGo to reach Athens, Central Asia, East Africa, and the Middle East with single-aisle economics. The first A321XLR was delivered in January 2026 and immediately deployed on Delhi to Athens. The A350 gets the headlines, but the A321XLR may be the aircraft that actually fits IndiGo best. IndiGo has not waited for its A350s. It signed a lease agreement with Norse Atlantic Airways for Boeing 787-9 Dreamliners, scaling up to 6 aircraft. The deal has a specific structure. Norse provides the aircraft, the cockpit crew, and the maintenance. IndiGo provides the cabin crew and handles commercial sales. It lets IndiGo learn long-haul operations before its own A350s arrive. The first leased 787-9 entered service in March 2025 on the Delhi-Bangkok route. By July 2025, IndiGo launched Mumbai to Manchester and Mumbai to Amsterdam. Norse is an oddly perfect partner. Norse Atlantic has long-haul 787s, IndiGo has passengers and brand power in India, but no long-haul wide-body experience. It's a marriage of opposite problems. Norse has aircraft looking for stable work. IndiGo has long-haul ambition, waiting for aircraft. Norse gives IndiGo something Airbus cannot deliver yet: time. Mumbai is a strong long-haul origin market. It has business demand, wealthy travelers, diaspora traffic, and international connectivity. Europe is one of the most logical first wide-body regions. Routes like Manchester and Amsterdam make sense because they have strong diaspora and visiting friends and relatives demand. They avoid the most brutally competitive mega routes. They are within a realistic 787 and A350 mission profile. Mumbai also became more useful, while Pakistani airspace restrictions affected northern India-Europe routings. On a long-haul route, geopolitics can show up directly in the fuel bill. Europe is the obvious first step. The problem is that obvious routes attract obvious competition. Air India, British Airways, Lufthansa, Air France KLM, Turkish Airlines, Emirates, Qatar Airways, Etihad. The first few Europe routes are easy to maintain. The 50th widebody route is the hard part. A narrowbody can be redeployed across dozens of short routes. A widebody is much less forgiving. If a long-haul route fails, the losses can be brutal. widebodies need strong premium demand, cargo revenue, long-haul sales capacity, global distribution, feed at both ends, partnerships, slot access, brand trust. On a widebody flying a 9 to 15-hour mission, turn times matter less. Fuel becomes up to 40% of total operating cost, making margins hypersensitive to oil prices. Crewing requires larger pilot pools and expensive hotel layovers. Disruptions cascade. IndiGo has mastered filling planes. The question is whether it can master filling the front of the plane. To offset these costs, widebody flights traditionally rely on high-yield premium cabins and belly cargo to subsidize economy seats. This logic forces IndiGo to do the very thing it spent 2 decades avoiding: install proper business class. There is a deeper logistical problem. IndiGo's domestic efficiency was built on point-to-point flying with short turnarounds. Running widebody long-haul requires the opposite, a hub-and-spoke model. To fill an A350, IndiGo must aggregate passengers from dozens of smaller Indian cities. Aircraft must wait on the ground in synchronized banks so passengers can connect. That necessary idle time actively destroys the core LCC advantage of maximum aircraft utilization. Gulf hubs work because they combine traffic from dozens of Indian cities into one global network. IndiGo's challenge is to internalize that model within India's borders. IndiGo already owns the spokes. The question is whether it can build the hub. Indian airports are improving, but hubbing remains hard. Delhi and Mumbai face congestion, slot constraints, and airspace issues. Bengaluru and Hyderabad may become future hubs, but need scale. India has giant airports. Giant airports are not automatically great hubs. In August 2024, IndiGo announced IndiGo Stretch, a proper business class product. The first A320neo equipped with Stretch entered service in November 2024. The hardware features a 38-inch pitch, 21.3-inch width, 5-inch recline, and 60-watt USB-C power. Passengers receive complimentary vegetarian meal boxes curated by Oberoi Hotels, priority checking in, and anytime boarding. On a 2-hour domestic flight, passengers may forgive simplicity. On a 9-hour flight to Europe, the product starts to matter. The moment IndiGo installs a serious business class, it stops just being IndiGo with bigger aircraft. IndiGo is not just fighting the Gulf, it is fighting a rebuilt Air India. In 2023, Air India announced a 470 aircraft order, valued at $70 billion at list prices, 250 from Airbus, including A350-900s, A350-1000s, and A320neos, and 220 from Boeing, including 787s, 777s, and 737 MAXs. The Vistara merger completed on November 12, 2024. Air India Express and AIX Connect merged on October 1, 2024. The Air India Group then operated a combined fleet of 300 aircraft, serving 55 domestic and 48 international destinations. This gives Air India domestic feed, international widebodies, a premium brand rebuild, Vistara's stronger service culture, Tata backing, and Star Alliance membership. IndiGo is entering long haul just as Air India is finally trying to stop being a punchline. Air India knows long haul, but has to fix itself. IndiGo knows execution, but has to learn long haul. A new structure threat is emerging from Saudi Arabia. Backed by the public investment fund, Riyadh Air plans to launch flights to major Indian cities. It'll operate Boeing 787-9s and eventually A321neos, explicitly designed to compete for India-West connecting traffic. Just as India tries to reclaim its long-haul passengers, Saudi Arabia is building another hub to take them. Riyadh Air joins an already crowded field. Emirates, Qatar Airways, Etihad, Saudia, Gulf Air, Turkish Airlines just beyond the Gulf. For IndiGo, Riyadh Air is a future problem, but it could become another one-stop competitor for Europe, Africa, and North America. In early March 2026, escalating Middle East conflicts resulted in severe airspace closures across Iran, Iraq, and the Gulf. Because the Norse 787s operated under European Union Aviation Safety Agency rules, they were strictly bound by EASA advisories prohibiting flights over conflict zones. Compounding by existing Pakistani airspace restrictions, IndiGo found itself with no commercially viable westbound flight path to Europe. The low-risk rehearsal had become an expensive grounding. Just months earlier, in December 2025, IndiGo suffered an operational meltdown following revised DGCA flight duty time limitations that capped pilot flight times at 8 hours daily and mandated 48 hours of continuous weekly rest. IndiGo failed to build sufficient operational buffers, cancelling thousands of flights and delaying thousands more. The DGCA imposed penalties. CEO Peter Elbers resigned in March 2026. The board appointed Willie Walsh, the former IAG chief and IATA director general, known industry-wide as Slasher for his cost discipline, to take over in August 2026. The danger is that IndiGo buys the aircraft before it fully proves the long-haul model. So, why is IndiGo doing this? You see, IndiGo's wide-body strategy doesn't attempt to become Emirates. Emirates will still carry millions through Dubai. Qatar Airways will still dominate Doha. These carriers serve passengers who want one-stop convenience at competitive prices. What IndiGo is building is a different proposition. A domestically fed Indian carrier, offering non-stop access to global cities, priced below full-service carriers, with hybrid premium options for those who need them. For travelers willing to pay slightly more to eliminate the stopover entirely, IndiGo can offer something Gulf hubs cannot match: direct Indian metropolitan service, backed by domestic feed. The 60 widebodies don't scale volume against Emirates, they scale strategic influence. They establish a brand position that supports IndiGo's entire international expansion. They signal to corporate clients, governments, and partners that IndiGo is a global airline. IndiGo's weakness is long-haul network coverage. Partnerships help solve that. IndiGo has partnered with Turkish Airlines for Europe connectivity via Istanbul. It has signed memorandums of understanding with Delta, Air France KLM, and Virgin Atlantic to improve connectivity between India, Europe, and North America. IndiGo may not need to fly everywhere itself. It can use partners to feed passengers beyond Europe, access North America without launching risky ultra-long-haul routes, build frequent flyer value, and improve corporate relevance. IndiGo's A350s may get it to Europe. Its partners may be what get passengers beyond it. Most foreign carriers cannot easily replicate IndiGo's emerging position. Building a domestic share in India takes decades. Securing slots at congested Indian airports requires sustained investment. Establishing brand trust with a billion-plus population is generational work. Yet every Gulf carrier, every European flag carrier, and Air India must now account for what IndiGo is demonstrating. The assumption that Indian long-haul belongs to foreign hubs is no longer absolute. The assumption that low-cost carriers cannot evolve into hybrid long-haul operators is being tested at unprecedented scale. The hubs of Dubai, Doha, and Abu Dhabi were built on Indian traffic. That Indian traffic becomes less captive when an Indian carrier offers non-stop alternatives, backed by domestic feed. India wants Indian carriers to carry more Indian passengers. Capturing long-haul traffic means more jobs, more aircraft based in India, more MRO potential, more airport revenue, more tourism control, more strategic connectivity. Air India and IndiGo are not just airline stories, they are part of India's broader ambition to become a global aviation power. In 2006, IndiGo placed its first order for 100 narrowbodies because there was no alternative path to building scale in a market dominated by failing flag carriers. The order was discipline, not ambition. The route was profitability through ruthless simplicity. 2 decades later, the 60 A350s represent the opposite. Not a compromise forced by circumstance, a deliberate choice to build something that didn't exist, an Indian low-cost carrier, evolving into a global hybrid airline, fed by the world's largest domestic monopoly, protected by selective bilateral restrictions, hedged by partnerships, and tested in advance through wet leased rehearsals. When those first A350s enter service in 2027, they'll carry passengers on routes that took nearly 2 decades of operational discipline to make possible. 60 widebodies, a handful of major intercontinental destinations, limited frequencies, and proof that sometimes the most significant changes in aviation don't require hundreds of aircraft. Sometimes they require discipline, domestic dominance, and the willingness to bet that an airline built on refusing complexity can finally absorb the right amount of it.